right, I'm happy to bring on an old friend to talk about some pro wrestling. Draven, what is up?
What's up, man? Just right here. We got just finished WrestleMania week, and talk about the landscape changing from like last Friday to like Monday. Just I almost feel like WrestleMania is kind of old news now, even though it wasn't even a week ago that we're all talking about how great the shows were, and well, at least night one. Night two was very controversial. But yeah, no, I mean, again, just dropping that bit of news of the merger was, completely changes everything, and you know, we're going into an uncertain future, I think, for lots of different reasons. So it's interesting. What's the rest of the year is going to be very, very interesting.
So I want to talk about all that stuff with you. And I see your hat. I know what you're doing here. We'll talk a little baseball too, because one of your other favorite pastimes is the beginning of the baseball season. So we'll talk a little Giants Dodgers. You guys are playing pretty well out of the gate as expected. But I wanted to show you one thing, and the people, unfortunately, if you're not watching on video, won't be able to see this. But I want Draven to see the special shirt that I wore for him. Hang on here.
Oh boy, getting that heat already. Right.
For those who weren't watching on video, they
Bob.
weren't able to see that. Bob from La Bamba, when he learns that
Yes.
his
Not my
girlfriend is
first or my last.
when he learns his girlfriend is pregnant, that was his reaction. So, and also, I also had to celebrate the great Selena in my coffee mug as well. So
There you
let's
go.
talk.
Okay.
Let's talk about the baseball stuff really quickly. So again, baseball is one of your favorite pastimes. It is the one sport that you follow as close or even more closely than wrestling. Do you, as a we're both a little bit older, do you still get those kid like feelings come opening day when baseball's about to start again?
I do, and I mean it was different this year because I had the whole WrestleMania hoopla around the city, and that coincided with opening day. Actually, opening was on WrestleMania weekend this year, so or thereabouts. So my mind was focused because I had a lot of people from out of town, as you could imagine. I had the
Oh yeah,
KLB crew here,
it was
so
it
there was
was
a
your
lot of
home, it was your homecoming, your hometown WrestleMania.
I almost I almost only went to one night because I'm old, right? And these kind of things, and the thing is, like, as you get older, it becomes more about logistics of and practicality. Like, how am I gonna get out of this, in and out of this stadium, right? And these thoughts kind of overtake the excitement of youth, because when you're young, you don't care. You're
Yeah.
like, I'll hitchhike if I have to all the way to SoFi.
Yeah.
But as you get older and those bones start to get a little brittle, it's like, do I really want to pay, $100 for parking and get in line with all the marks, and so I was only gonna go to one night. I haven't told anyone that, and I'm probably gonna get some heel heat from that for that news. But originally I was just gonna go to night two. So as interestingly enough, if I was only going to go to night two, I was planning on having all these events for the fans, right? For the
Yeah.
people that listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
But what happened is that as the time was approaching, the little kid inside of me got more excited.
Yeah.
So I started buying tickets to all these, not only night one of WrestleMania, but also New Japan was in town. You can't say no New Japan. I mean, and I don't
Yeah.
regret it. Also we had Ring of Honor was in town as well. So all of a sudden my schedule started stacking up with all these shows, and really we couldn't really plan out a night just focus on the fans that listen to my podcast or whatnot.
Right. Right.
So, but I did get to say hi to a lot of them. I was with I actually drove some around, just kind of giving them a tour of the city or whatnot. So we did get to do some of that, but my excitement got the better of me, and I always felt like this was gonna be my big retirement anyway. So, and by that I mean more like just going to all these shows, because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
done with that, man. And after this weekend, I was hurting, so I was like, you know what, that's it for me. I mean, if obviously if there's a match that's promoted as like once in a lifetime kind of thing, I mean, I'll go. But as far as being, the consistency that I used to have when I was younger, I mean, you're talking to a guy here that I went on loops with the WWE when they were in Southern California.
Yeah.
Like me and my friends, you know, and I'll disclose this on here because you know me.
Yeah.
When I was in my when I was in my younger years, WWE was in town. We bought a bunch of alcohol. We booked some room and maybe a little more things harder than alcohol. We'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And we would follow. Like I remember, I once did a loop of San Diego, Las Vegas, Anaheim, Los Angeles, and I think it was like Bakersfield or something. So we
Wow.
were doing what they were doing, and we're partying the entire time. So
Well,
when I
they
say I'm gonna,
they may have been partying the entire time too. We don't know.
well, what's interesting is that we do that, and nobody does that. You have to be a weirdo like myself to do shit like that, and the group of friends that I have. Um, when you do that by osmosis, you're gonna meet some of these guys just because
Yeah.
you're following them around. So we got to, we got to meet a few guys. I remember Jeff Hardy was at a 7-Eleven once, and a mark went up to him, a fan, I should say, because Vince McMahon doesn't like the term mark.
No.
Um,
Big Dave
so
M either.
there you go. You're right. And so a fan came up to Jeff Hardy and he's like, "Are you Jeff Hardy?" And Jeff Hardy's like, "I don't know, am I?" And then he just runs out into his rental and just forwards it out of there. Like that was the funniest thing I've ever seen because this little fan was like, he was just asking a question. And the thing is that Jeff Hardy was in full gimmick minus the face paint. Like he
Yeah.
had those pants he wears and those shirts and those sleeves. So I'm thinking, dude, come on,
He wanted to be noticed.
Exactly. Over the years, when I did all like when I used to go to PWG a lot when I was a regular there, we had this saying like the biggest marks for the wrestlers are the wrestlers because they're the ones that wear their own shirts, right? You'll see a wrestler wearing his own shirt, which has been always awkward to me. And they're really the ones that get invested into the business from quote unquote being taken advantage of as a
Yeah.
mark, right? Which was the thing that came from back in the day. So yeah, so I mean, I was very tired and it was fun, but this is it for me. Other than the big show here and there, I'm done
What
with
about
this.
when you get to do the seat filler gimmick? Are you still going to take advantage of that?
No, I'm not gonna do that anymore. I'm not
No?
gonna do that anymore. That's it. I,
Man.
I had a chance with the SmackDown that was at the Hall of Fame show, and I didn't want to. So,
Man.
anyways,
It is really the end of an era then for you.
yeah, and I'm not going to any independent shows. I mean, again, will I hit the occasional one? Sure,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the consistency is over. Yeah, and so that's where I'm at. But it was a very fun weekend. I had a good time.
I have my own Jeff Hardy story that I probably told you probably like immediately when it happened, but just for the people who are listening, it was WrestleMania New York, so it was 35, and I think we were at the bar of the hotel where the wrestlers were staying that weekend, and I'm friends with John the Rocket. He's friends with people in WWE, and he's friends with wrestlers and stuff. So we were kind of like, they were like, "Hey, just come hang out with us." So we weren't really with any of the WWE people. They were in their own crew. We were kind of off to the side, and we were near where the bathroom was. And so Jeff Hardy, he comes over to where we are, and we're like, "Oh, that's cool. That's Jeff Hardy." And so he asks Dave Dutra, who's a independent NorCal wrestler, where's the bathroom? And so Dutra like points it. It's like right behind us. Like, yeah, it's right there. So I would say about an hour later, Jeff Hardy comes over again, and we're like, oh, maybe he wants to come hang. And he goes up to Dave Dutra again and goes, "Hey man, where's the bathroom?" It's like, dude, we just told you where the bathroom was. So, and I don't think Jeff was doing anything too crazy, but he's
No.
had his issues, so I don't want to make fun of him. But it was just
Mhm.
kind of funny. We were in a safe place, so no one was getting hurt. But I just wanted to. You're already
Well, that
getting some comments in here. Look at
I
who
see
the
that.
Dames came out and said that
A
you're the
bunch of
draw
the
tonight.
Latino world order is in full force because there's a bunch of Latinos here. Uh,
That's why I wore my shirt. I got my coffee mug, and look, and oh man, another one for you. Carlos is here, and also
yeah,
Mario checking out,
Mario, yeah.
calling shots. No, you're a very popular person. That's why I wanted you. By the way, you mentioned your podcast. What's up with the podcast? K
I
Fabulous
mean,
Lucha Brothers.
yeah, it's pretty much. I think it's not coming back. I think we had our run, right? I mean, nothing. It's just one of those things where you're ready to take on the next challenge, and on to better and bigger things. And any other political answer that you want to hear. That's what's going on here. You know, good luck and Big D's future endeavors. I'm always rooting for the guy, of course.
Of course,
But yeah, no,
big.
it was just. I mean, there's a couple of things. It was that. I mean, primarily the run is over. I mean, we were on for almost 10 years. We started in
Yeah, yeah,
2014.
yeah.
But also, I think in general, like around September, October, there was a lot of cynicism online, and it wasn't just with Big D. It was just all over the place, and it was just, it was a situation where I started analyzing it, with Tony Khan or whatnot, and I started really matching up a lot of the criticisms that he was getting,
Yeah.
and some of them were like below the belt, and I was like, there's a lot of projection going on here, and the thing is, somebody like TK, I mean, for better or worse, he's got that look, right? That would invite projection. Just let's be real about it. And it's very unfortunate because somebody with a more imposing presence wouldn't have that kind of feedback. This
They
idea.
wouldn't pick on him so much.
Yes. And so I started really with the people that I knew enough to make these assumptions. I started really noticing, okay, is this projection? Because the people that are criticizing Tony Khan, they don't have a lot going on, and I would notice that, and just and I came to the conclusion that I was very mean spirited, and I know that a lot of I mean I'll say it right here. I know that Big D got upset at me because he was like, you were in the mud in there with all of us,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's fine. But there comes a point. I mean, I don't know what's so wrong about just kind of changing your mind or maybe changing perspectives, right? And getting out
Right,
of that mud. You know what I'm saying?
right.
So I think I was just tired of that because every time that I would log on, it was the same thing. And it's like, to me, if you're gonna clown on somebody, at least make it funny. I was tired of
Mhm.
seeing the same jokes. It was the same thing over and over. And so I decided, you know what, I'm done with this. Because there was no actual conversation about wrestling that didn't delve into, like, let's pick sides and then let's just make fun of one side. Like, that was always where it would inherently go. And I was like, I just got tired of it.
So
So
this is actually a great way to even though we kind of skipped the baseball stuff, but this is a great way to dovetail into something that I'm actually really interested in your thoughts about, which is the the dynamic of being online and always being online and that becoming sort of who you are and not being able to now I don't maybe they can tell the difference, maybe it's an act, all that stuff, but like just like there are lots of people and we started we started on the F4W online message board, kind of where we're throwing, and even before that I'm sure you were on like
mhm,
message boards and stuff before that, but that like those people who are on the board now, they're on Twitter, they're on in discords and such, and I see that there's like this persona that they have to play, like this is how they have to be online, really snarky, really deliberate of trying to dunk on people, trying to make people look bad, a lot of bad faith kind of stuff. And I'm sure it's prevalent in all kinds of genres. I'm sure the Star
sure.
Wars, ones are really bad. And I see mostly the sports ones, like, the basketball or the Warriors. But to me, the ones that are like these created personas seem to be a little bit more in pro wrestling. And I wonder if that is because pro wrestlers are a gimmick and are not their real selves. So the fans like, oh, I want to create this character because I love pro wrestling. Because it's kind of frustrating dealing with those folks online. You just kind of just end up blocking them, and but they're prevalent out there, right? Like, is there any correlation between pro wrestling and the way that these people act?
Well, I think we want to believe that they have some self-awareness, right? We want to believe that this is all an act, because anything other than that is kind of sad when you think
Yeah,
about it.
right.
And when I go to these shows and I see a lot of these fans, I see how much the lifestyle revolves around them. And that's one of the things that, for better or worse, I've always been very fortunate in that, we're, for as much, I mean, I'm a big wrestling nerd, right? I'm in there with all of them. I'm not taking myself apart from these people or saying
You
that I'm
love the
better than them.
history of the business.
Yes, and also I love to watch it. I'm a lifer. I mean, I'm here till the end. But with that said, there's other parts of who I am, right? There's other parts of my personality. There's other parts of my social interactions. And so I think it's important to be able to understand where it starts and where it ends. And for a lot of these people, this is it, and I think they're so fanatical about it that they kind of almost lose the perspective of reality sometimes. Because you go on
Mhm.
Twitter and some of these people are so passionate and they talk as if their opinion has some sort of influence, which is scary, you
Yeah.
know. And so I think that's something that this fan base definitely we see a lot of. But again, I think at the end of the day, we also have to understand, and this is another hard pill to swallow, is what kind of demographics are being representative by the niche fan bases, right? Because I mean, I belong to groups that are talking about mental health. I belong
Yeah.
to groups that are talking about research, and you don't see people going in there and playing characters. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
again, with a lot of these niche groups, you see it a lot because unfortunately, the demographic, it's representative of the lowest common denominator, and that's a fact. The reason why it seems so prevalent is because a lot of them bleed into each other, right? So you have like the Star Wars fans who are also wrestling fans. So it gives the illusion of this being the norm, right? Like, why are these people like that? But when you get out of that bubble, you start to see that it isn't really like that. It's just these little pockets of different of fandoms that are like that. But it is frustrating because again, when you want to talk at anything that's below the surface, you just can't, and then you go into this whole fantasy booking thing, right? Which is also frustrating because these people are fantasy booking like if they're in the sandbox with their little GI Joes out, right? They don't think about the logistics of what it is to actually come up with a WrestleMania card and actually think about the business end of it
Mhm.
and the future of that. Their whole thing is my emotional favorite is going to headline WrestleMania regardless. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And then they're going to face my emotional most, this favorite person. So it's frustrating because it's hard to have real conversations on the internet for sure.
So
And so
you
that's
you
why I left.
you said something that I think is really smart and is also a part of at least the reason that WWE says that this is a smart deal for them, this merger, acquired by Endeavor, merging with the UFC. And I saw a quote from Ari Emanuel where he was talking about how WWE does great ratings, but they still get lower ad rates based, comparable to the kind of ratings that they usually get. And I think it goes right back to what you're saying is there is a thought that the audience who watches wrestling is a little bit more lowbrow and is a little bit more about the low common denominator. But you yourself just said two things. You said, one, you're a lifer, and two, you're in these other groups with really smart people and professional people. So I would imagine there are more people like you. And do you think Ari Emanuel can help WWE change that stereotype or change that perspective of what a pro wrestling fan is?
It's gonna be hard because I think you gotta understand that before '84, we did see doctors at ringside, right? That were not there for working. We did see lawyers. We did see these upper class professions represented at ringside, right? Especially in St. Louis, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, I think Vince McMahon. It's interesting because Vince McMahon has, in his mind, has always wanted to raise the scale of what professional wrestling is. But unfortunately, I think Vince McMahon's personality, including his sense of humor, has always been a detriment to that, because Vince McMahon has a very lowbrow sense of humor. And so I think he's contributed to enabling the wrestling business to be seen as this lowbrow entertainment. He hasn't helped it at all. And I'm not just talking about the toilet humor. That in itself doesn't help, and that's very embarrassing. But also the lack of consistency with storytelling, right? I mean, I think when people are operating at a different level, they want to be invested in more thought out, abstract storytelling. And we don't get that in WWE. We get a lot of, like, start and stop stuff. One of the things that was, I don't know, I think it was a little bit insulting to me, like when Sami Zayn went on the press call, on the presser, whatever they call
Mm-hmm.
them now, those
Mm-hmm.
kayfabe fucking press
Yeah.
conferences.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, now we're telling real stories. and,
Yeah.
and I'm like, if you watch real stories, if you read books that are very in-depth, or even films, buddy, you're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
At minimum, that storyline, really what it is that it's just a long storyline. You know what I'm
You're
saying?
talking
And
about the
maybe,
bloodline.
yeah, the bloodline storyline. But it seems like it's this, highbrow kind of storyline because of the length of time, but also some of the twists and turns. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's more they could do with that, at a deeper level. And to their credit, that's great. That's a great start. But Sami Zayn's over here calling himself the Sopranos all of a sudden, and I'm like, you're not there yet, man. Just relax with that.
Okay,
You
that's a
know.
great point, and I want to scratch that a little bit more, in because you're also a film buff.
Mm-hmm.
You love movies. You're a historian and someone who really looks at them in depth ways.
Right.
And also you watch TV. You watch really good shows. Why can pro wrestling not be like a prestige TV show or like a really thoughtful movie? Is it because, and now we're going back to this idea of what they think about their own fan base? Is it they're speaking to a lowest common denominator, or is the process of producing wrestling television the way that you have to do it? You just can't tell the story in that way because you're limited to 2 hours or whatever. Like, why is it that you think that is?
I think, well, first of all, let's start with giving them the benefit of the doubt. They do deal with a lot of injuries, right? And that creates reservations in investing in a long term storyline. But there again, you create this self fulfilling prophecy, because if you're paranoid about injuries and never commit to a long term storyline because of that, then you're never going to actually have a long term storyline with depth and character development. So that's what they like to say, right? Oh, we have injuries and they always get in the way. Okay, fine. Let's put that aside. At the end of the day, I really believe that they don't respect their audience. I believe that and I'll give a little examples with WrestleMania. I believe that this line about, notice how everything is spoon fed to us, including the what is that opening line? The now forever together, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a very condescending line, I think. It's like, you don't have to tell us that. It's the subliminal messages. We're all in this together, and we got to stay loyal. That's what they're trying to tell us. But the way they treat their audience is very much like the audience doesn't have the comprehension to keep up with long-term, abstract storylines. And so they just give us these basic run-of-the-mill storylines. And so what happens is that that's the audience you're going to attract, right? That's why you create the chicken and the egg thing, where it's like, is the audience lowbrow? Which came first, the audience being lowbrow or the product being lowbrow? Well, it
Yeah.
kind of, they both have a systemic effect on each other, and until that changes, it's we're never gonna see the six-figure dollar people sitting at ringside. like we remember in UFC back in the day when it was like we used to see those guys in suits with the hot girls and everything. That's because UFC was, they were giving us those kind of storylines that were organically created. And I don't think they're doing that anymore either. I haven't watched in the Fertitta Soul, so I don't know
Oh,
nothing
well,
about
okay,
UFC.
but now that they're combined with WWE in one company, I was wondering if that was going to bring you back.
No, no, no. I don't really care about mixed martial arts anymore because I think I gravitate more towards characters,
Yeah.
and larger than life superstars. And I mean, from what I understand, we haven't had one of those in mixed martial arts in a long time. So I don't know. I just
I
think
mean,
that
Conor McGregor, but he's kind of, as far as being a fighter, he's on his way down for sure because
yeah,
it's a little hard to have a long career in MMA when you're getting hit for real.
yeah, yeah. But I also don't really kind of embrace what we call the halo effect in psychology. I don't embrace this idea that just because you're a star that you need to be respected. This blind loyalty that people seem to have. Conor McGregor is a big turnoff for me because I know that he's not the greatest human being outside of the octagon. He's kind of an
Yeah,
asshole actually.
yeah.
And so to me that plays a role. Like I can't respect somebody who's gotten away with the things that he's done. And so I need to have somebody that comes in and really just, whether it's promo skills or fighting ability, somebody that, and it's also going to be somebody that I'm going to hear about, because I don't look into UFC news anymore either. And that's when I'll be like, okay, let me check this guy out. And
Yeah.
sure enough, if it works. But yeah, so I think that's what's going on with the WWE's inability to create a more highbrow entertainment.
And you kind of made a really good point there about McGregor and maybe the turnoff of McGregor. But what do you think about this super company being run by Vince McMahon, who we've learned paid off lots of women and paid off, you know, situations in which he was probably, more than likely being a sexual abuser. And then Dana White, who
Slapped
just
his
last
wife.
year slapped his wife, got caught on phone. Like that's who's running both of these come now, not actually run, Ari Emanuel is at the top, but Vince is right underneath Ari, and Dana is right underneath Mark Shapiro on the other side. So heavy influence for both. And man, that's a company you want to support. That's the one that's going to be hard, I think.
Well, it's hard. I mean, from an ethical perspective, right? As far as being the kind of human being that you want to be, and the values that you have, it makes it difficult, right? But I think as a fan, and this is, I think, living in a developed country, is something that we have to come to terms with, right? And we have to accept. Yeah, we are. I'm still going to be watching. Do I like it? No. And is it difficult for me? Yes. Again, it's a conflict of ethics for me. So on that end, it's difficult. It's a
Yeah.
difficult decision, but I try to separate the artist from the person, right? And ultimately, Dana White and Vince McMahon are two of the greatest promoters ever. And if we're studying that aspect of the business, they're the best.
Yep.
So again, it is a thin line of how far do we take it with how horrible these two human beings can be at times.
Yep.
Now, with that said, that's one side. On the other side, and the one that I really think is going to be more something that we're going to be able to observe it better, is how they're going to get along. So I think these two guys being snakes, eventually they're going to want to bite each other's heads off. And I was reading Dave's write up earlier on this entire situation, right? With the
Yeah.
Observer that came out today,
Yep.
and I almost see like Ari Emanuel kind of like Trojan horsing his way into WWE, the infrastructure of WWE, because you've seen it before in other businesses with the mergers, right?
Yep.
We're all buddies, we're all gonna be best friends. And I saw, like, I really see WWE getting duped here. And I understand how they sold it, right? I mean, Vince could have cashed out now with a potential buyer, but Ari Emanuel was like, well, it's going to be a longer term investment, but it's also more stability, right? It creates that generational wealth, 10 times over. And so I think Vince was sold in that way. Not that it's going to flop, because we don't know, but I definitely see some, because you got a lot of people that have big egos, right? And especially Vince. one of the things people will compare Dana and they'll say, well, Dana could work with Ari Emanuel, but Dana, he came from a structure where he was always working with the Fertitas,
Yep.
so he knows that teamwork dynamic, whereas Vince doesn't. Vince is a very prideful person, right? To the point where he couldn't even stay away for 6 months, you know,
God.
with seeing his baby being run the way it was, and
Successfully, by the way.
yes, yes, and it makes you wonder if this guy would bite his nose off in spite of his face, right? It makes you wonder how egotistical he is to where he'll blow his own ship off if he doesn't get his way. I could see that with him.
Yeah.
So that's concerning. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know. I don't know if Vince could play nice with people once they start pushing him and contradicting him. And I think that's going to happen organically because just with all the people that are involved.
Well, I was talking to Dave today. We recorded Wrestling Observer Radio, and the one thing that I didn't think about is, obviously WWE's now it's hot. They're riding a hot streak. Stock's all the way up to $100. And so if it stays like this, obviously, like, this is a great time. But as we know, the ups and downs of wrestling business, we've seen that stock go down. We've seen it go up. And the way Dave explained it is that Vince now has a piece of the UFC. And the way the UFC business works is they don't have as many of those ups and downs because all of their TV money is, consistent, and it doesn't really matter how many pay-per-views they sell. Their current TV deal, they just get a large chunk of money. Their gates are great. They themselves do not overstay their welcome for these big shows. They just have the 12 big shows. They don't got to run 5 hours of television 2 days a week. They run their weekend shows and people watch if they want. And if not, it's not it's not based on draw. And so if WWE's business starts to fail a little bit and they get cold, if they were by themselves, that stock takes a hit. But now UFC, can help keep them afloat, and where Vince doesn't lose so much money based off of the stock. So I thought that was a very interesting thing that he said. And, which also, I don't know, I guess I figure when you're in your late 70s, you're not still so conservative and playing the long game, but this dude is still playing the long game, which is kind of amazing.
But I think it's still very much power based. I think it's still very much, because when you're that old and when you have that kind of money, regardless, it does become more about holding on to the power that you've had for 40, 45 years.
Yeah.
And I think what Vince did was that he latched his wagon on UFC, which is going to provide more stability, but he's also risking giving away a little bit of that power. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be interesting how it plays out. And I think that's how Endeavor sold it to him. It's like, yeah, you latch on to us. Look, we go from, what was it, from being a 5 billion to 12 billion combined, right? I think it was 12 billion. So it's that was their way in. So again, how is it going to look in the future? That's where it's going to get interesting, because Endeavor said, Ari Emanuel specifically is like, we're going to do the UFC playbook. We're going to run the UFC playbook with WWE. I don't know, man. I don't know if you run any other playbook other than Vince's playbook when it comes to WWE, And again, Dana White has always been very open because he was used to that structure. Vince has never been used to that structure.
Here's a stat that I thought was really amazing, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So sponsorship revenue from WrestleMania was $20 million. And Meltzer wrote that by next year's WrestleMania, the sponsorship money that they bring in could outdo the gate money, which is just mind-blowing to me. So not only do you not, all of your money is guaranteed, and now when it comes to your biggest show of the year, yeah, if we don't sell as many tickets as we usually do, guess what? The sponsorship revenue is going to more than make up for it. The way that they've built this business and they've put this thing together is amazing. They've created a cash cow, and it's just unless somehow these television rights and these streaming rights, take a hit, man, it just feels like they're so set and they keep improving on things and they keep, some of these other pieces of the business plan, they're growing it. And it's amazing to me because this is not the WWE that even we watched in 1998 when it was the hottest thing that was going, and it was still hotter than how it is today. But the business aspect of today's wrestling is like 100 times better than it was in 98.
Right, right. But of course, 98, and I think this is a good lesson, not only in business but in life. I mean, 98 was definitely a building block to where we're at now, right? I think they've been very smart in taking advantages of technology, and just that they've had some good business acumen and really made the right moves. um One thing I will say though is that the sponsorship thing, uh it was weird because it's really trial and error, because they really got a lot of heel heat live in the building, because this WrestleMania they pushed a lot of sponsorships.
Yeah.
And I know, I watch baseball. I really got into football because my brother loves the Eagles. And I noticed that they deal with the way they deal with their sponsors is not as like intrusive as WWE does with their sponsors. Like, you don't see like the football shape, like the Stridex pads. You know what I'm saying? And, and so that's gonna be a problem because so many people were so unhappy with the way the sponsorships affect the artistic part of
Mm.
wrestling. You can't have a blood feud and have like what was it Captain Crunch, the cereal with Dominic and that was so cartoony, man. And see, again, how much do you respect your audience where you don't even take that into consideration?
Mhm.
You're like, you know what, just throw it there because who cares?
The
They're gonna
pit, the
watch it.
pitch, the pitch black match from Royal Rumble.
Yeah, exactly. And to their credit, I think they learned from that. It was that we didn't get anything that extreme this time.
Well, because we
But
also didn't have a Bray Wyatt, which they usually throw these gimmicks on.
yeah, that is true. But that was interesting to me because I was observing the entire night, and people hated all these sponsors. The Pope's Exorcist, which
Yes,
it was combined with the Hell in the Cell match.
that was a weird one.
Yes, that got so much heel heat. And to me, I know there was executives there, right, from all these sponsors. So they're observing and they're listening, and so they're seeing all this booing for their product, and it's not really booing for their product; it's booing for the placement of their product. So I think, in a sense, yes, $20 million sounds great, but then, and the other side of that is, how much are you going to respect your audience and kind of place these product placements in different parts of your show? Because I just found it so disrespectful, and not only to the audience but also to the wrestlers, because we said earlier, we started this show by saying they're the biggest marks for themselves. So I don't think they appreciate having their match be a backdrop to a commercial, you know. But there again, let's keep this talk about business. How about that part of the big merger? The fact that these fighters on both ends, right? These UFC fighters and these wrestlers are still very highly underpaid.
Oh yeah.
You know, you compare the Dodgers payroll to, like, compared to what the Dodgers make compared to what UFC and WWE make. I mean, WWE and UFC make a lot more per year, and their payroll is a lot less, you know. And so that's a big advantage for all these deal makers. The division of labor is completely one-sided. It's like these guys are getting peanuts. I think Dave was the one that broke it down, and he was saying that every WWE wrestler should be able to make at least 7 figures a year, and WWE will still be extremely profitable.
Oh yeah.
And that's not happening. That's not even close to happening. And I think that's very unfair, because again, the business is built on the backs of all these guys and girls that go out there every week and bust their ass. And it just seems like it's a very tyrannical place to work at, and that hasn't changed, including
Absolutely.
taking away a lot of their extra revenue options as well, which is even more horrendous in my opinion.
Yeah, it's part of this weird thing, and I've always wondered what you thought about that. Well, not necessarily what you thought, but I've always wondered what the sort of the public thinks about this, because a lot of the stories when you hear about the wrestlers, Vince was my father figure. And like I would never tell, like I have a dad and he's my father figure, right? But some people may not have that father figure and they're sort of searching for that. Vince McMahon isn't like maybe in the top 99% of a father figure that I would think that someone would, someone
Yeah.
would, ask Shane. I don't know. Is Shane see his own pops as a father figure?
I don't know. He's
But
got other things to worry about.
but does wrestling attract maybe people who are not stable, I guess. And we look at someone like MJF, and I'm honestly just wondering what attracted MJF to professional wrestling, because it looks like that dude could have been successful at a bunch of different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you see time and time again these wrestlers come in, and a lot of it is like, well, this happened and this happened, and I didn't have whatever it was. Like, that's like literally the Rock story, right? He had $7 in his pocket, and he even had a pops who wrestled, but he was still searching for whatever it is. Do you think wrestling more than other places attract folks who are sort of in search of something like that?
I do think there's an insecurity factor to it for sure, and I think there's a lot of different variables here. The infrastructure that WWE created, and I think when we talk about Vince's genius, quote unquote, we don't give enough credit to how he kind of redefined what it is to be a WWE superstar. And I would say this started about a little bit after he bought WCW. He started to creating this. He created this narrative that being a WWE superstar is a privilege, and it's something that you should be grateful for, right? And that's the narrative that you're hitting the head over and over with.
What do you think Bruiser Brody would have thought about that pitch?
He would have told him to fuck off. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And even guys like, because Ric Flair, when he went in there, he was already a broken man.
Yeah.
So Ric Flair was
a great example.
Yeah.
A perfect example.
Yeah, and so he was broken. He said this many, many times. I think he's still broken, honestly, but that's a story for another time. And so what happened? Vince takes advantage of that, right? Because let's not also forget that Vince is a con man. We forget that sometimes, and he uses.
I'm with you.
He uses the tools that any con man would use to kind of manipulate, break down somebody, and then build them back up. That's classic con man. What they do. And I think with Rick, he saw Rick had been, he had been through hell and back with Bischoff, right? From 98 to 2001. He comes into the company in late 2001, and he's a shell of his former self. He doesn't have the confidence. Well, there's Daddy Vince to pick him up.
And the bank account is a part of it, right? Because Vince can go, oh, you need help, I'll help you. And all of a sudden now Rick is like in debt to this guy.
Right. And I'll never forget, I think it was Don King. Remember how Don King, he used to go to the boxers that were in poverty, and he used to roll up with like a Lamborghini or something, right? And he used to give it to them, and he's like, all right, here, this is your new car, but first sign this paper. And then he would sign off like power of attorney to him, but they had their Lamborghini. But to them, it was such a privilege because they were poor, right? Yeah. And I think Vince thrives on that, because in regular sports, you have baseball, basketball, football players who are recruited. They're very cuddled very early on, right? Yes. They know their worth because there's a culture that reminds them of their worth constantly. Wrestlers don't have that. Wrestlers are fighting in the independents, making $20 in a hot dog every night. And so Vince comes around, he cuts you a 6-figure check, which, in relative terms is not a lot of money. But when this is your passion, it just magnifies. And on top of that, there's this weird thing in psychology when two people's passions kind of collide, there's this sense of like connection, right? Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine like at WrestleManias where it's at a fever pitch, and these guys go through the curtain, and he gives everybody that hug that they always show on the network and stuff. That's magic right there.
Except Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens didn't get that hug.
But there again, that's the same conversation, because look at how bad he took it.
Yeah.
That's manipulation right there. Taking away that validation from a father figure, it fucked with Kevin Owens, and it shouldn't have. He's just another guy.
You made a great point, and this is something Sammy Guevara just said on their All Access show
I
when
don't
he
know if
was
you're working me when you said Guevara or Guevara, because really it's Guevara, but
Guevara, and he said whenever he gets unhappy about where he's at, he just thinks back to 10 years ago when he was working for a fast food restaurant, right? And that's exactly
yes.
what you're saying.
Hmm.
So he is indebted to the business because of what it gave him. It gave him his wife, it gave him a career. And
Hmm.
so he's gonna, he doesn't want to give that up. And that's why Brock Lesnar it will always have more leverage than everybody because he's willing to give up something because he sees everything as just sort of a job and it just sort of an ends to a means to an end.
Yes.
Um, this is fantastic stuff, and you and I can talk about this stuff forever. But I do want to bring it back a little bit to the live WrestleMania because I wanted to get your thoughts. You already said night one was great. I think a lot of people are calling that maybe the greatest WrestleMania of all time. WrestleMania 17 is still up there, but night two, uh, I found night two to still be a pretty good show, but I was actually surprised that there wasn't more people upset at the Cody Rhodes finish at the end there when Cody did not beat Roman Reigns and Roman Reigns won again. I expected maybe a little bit more of an uproar, but what it told me is that I think the audience just has a little bit more faith in the product right now. They give him a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt because the Bloodline storyline has been so solid. What did
Hmm.
you sense when you were live there in the building and Roman beat Cody in the main event?
Well, you're right. I didn't sense disappointment as much as I sensed shock. Right. It
Hmm.
was it was not as bad, but it was very reminiscent of the Undertaker's streak ending at WrestleMania 30. There was complete silence because I think everybody was jazzed about that big celebration that we thought we were gonna get at the end of the night, and when we saw that 3 count, it was just silence, and then people just kind of started heading towards the exits, like without saying anything. But it wasn't disappointment; it was just shock.
Hmm.
Um, and I agree with everything you said, but I think another point is how over Roman Reigns is as
Yeah,
well as a babyface. Because I think had it been anyone else that wasn't as over as him, I think there would have been more of an uproar, like you said. So I think there was this idea like because one of the mumblings that I heard as I was walking out of the stadium was, "Oh, they're going for 1,000 days. They're going." That was the
yeah.
constant theme. And so I think once the fans kind of came to terms with that, they were accepting of it on the spot, which is weird because that usually takes like a week to really. So it was like a state of shock,
I think
and then it
today
was
is actually 950.
right,
There's
right.
50 more days, and when we get to the 50 day, the F4W convention,
Yeah, that's true.
because that's
Um,
that Saudi show I think is like 1,000 days or something. That Saudi show Memorial Day weekend.
all right. This year, as a side note, not that anybody listening cares, but I'm gonna skip it this year because I'm gonna go to Dallas for a horror convention. So there's
There
the
you
nerd
go.
in me.
There you go.
It was a very hard decision. I'll
You're a
tell you
man
that.
of many passions. You don't, you have lots of interests. So
But it wasn't easy making that decision. Much like I'm sure that Paul couldn't decide whether to go with Cody or Roman. I had to decide Dallas or Vegas, and I went with Dallas. Um, but yeah, it was very interesting, and I'm with you. I thought it was gonna be more of an uproar. I thought we were gonna get those cat calls on Monday Night Raw. Where that's tradition anyway.
yeah,
And we didn't. I mean, and I also feel like we're in a different generation now where that those cat calls just to get yourself over, they're not there anymore. If you notice, they're not as prevalent as they used to be. I think as fans we have more of an understanding that it's not Cody Rhodes' fault.
yeah,
Even another thing that shocked me to keep the conversation on my life experience was how little negative reaction we got when they stopped the Hell in the Cell, where Finn Balor was getting the staples, because in another era that would have gotten shed on
yeah,
because everything just stood still for a while, and especially live because at least on TV they kind of cut to Edge, and Edge was trying to play it off, and he went to get some gimmicks out that he never used just to kind of have some movement, right?
yeah.
Uh, in another era, as you know, that would have been all kinds of shit on that match, and it would have never recovered. In this era, I was sensing an understanding. I was sensing this is not part of the match, but we understand that there's an athlete that's hurt right now. So we're going to be respectful and wait for this to kind of get resolved, and then we're going to get back into the match. So we're seeing kind of like a generational shift in the audience as to how they view wrestling as well, which I think is for a positive, because again, in another era, I think there would have been a lot of pressure on those guys to just continue, right? Um, so yeah, it's interesting. Now, do I agree with the booking? Absolutely not. And Triple H's excuse doesn't hold any water with me, because his thing is the story continues, but it's WWE. When is it ever gonna end?
Never.
You know, WWE stories have phases, right? Stories have chapters, and this was the peak of this chapter. Anything past Roman keeping the title past WrestleMania is going to give diminishing returns, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's a bad thing. Not that we're going to go back to, like, having 3,000 fans at a TV taping. I'm not saying that, but we're going to see, it's gonna be on the downtrend, because who else is left? And this was the time to do it. And that's not me as a mark talking. That's me thinking about the business. I think Paul got so fixated on this 1,000-day thing because they love to create those legends, right? They love
Yep.
to kind of create these little markers in time with these legends. And they figure out somewhere along the line, oh my God, he's closer to 1,000 than we thought. Let's just keep it through. And Roman's going to be made for life in that sense. Well, he's already made, but more so.
Okay, so here's something that I want to add to that, because I think it's a great point. We have these fake records that are out there. How many times did Ric Flair win the title? And Charlotte has all these different number of title wins, and John Cena has these. And so they always, you have your era, and you have the star of that era. And I was kind of thinking, I think they want Roman to be the biggest star ever. Like, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock. I don't think Roman will ever be as big as Austin was. Like, there's no way. But you add a longevity piece to it, and you add like these biggest WrestleManias of all time, and we pretend that maybe he headlined them. and he did headline it, but it's the brand drawing. He adds to that, though. I don't agree with people who say that he has nothing to do with any of this.
No, I don't agree with that either.
I really think that what they are trying to do is they are trying to create a historic wrestler, a historic superstar, and they want this era to mean something. And he is kind of the guy that they're using for that.
No, I agree with you, and that in itself is not bad logic. I completely understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
It's gonna be very it's gonna be very mythical going forward, because I know as the narrative gets longer and longer, there's gonna be more bullshit added to it, especially 5-10 years down the road, as they keep on saying this new narrative about this run. But again, one of the things that really upset me when it came to the internet and just people that quote unquote know their stuff is when they were defending Sammy not winning the title in February, right? Because
Yeah.
they say, they got to finish the story. They got to finish the story. And to me, as a good booker, there's only one lesson that a booker needs to know, and that's you always follow the money. That's it. Always follow the money. And sometimes that's going to go against what you want as a booker, but that's what makes you a great booker. You adapt to follow the money. My point is that this was a blow-off show, WrestleMania Night 2. This was a show where everything was peaking for this moment, and I think there was more money in Cody winning for a lot of different reasons that they could do in the future than in Roman continuing that dominance, going towards that marker of 1,000 or whatever it is they want to do. And I was so frustrating to listen to people that think they know what wrestling is about, talking about, well, we got to finish this story. Why? Who can't? Why do you have to finish? It doesn't matter, because at the end and this is the irony, you had all these people that were defending that, right? And then at the end of the day, WWE changed the story anyway.
Yeah.
So the joke was on all of them, and it's like, no, you go with who's hot, because that's what's gonna keep the bubble going, the momentum going, right? That's what's gonna keep the sellouts. And you saw the metrics, right? You saw Sammy, the ratings patterns, the draws that he was at the house shows, and this is where it became very evident when Roman wasn't there. There was a couple times where Sammy's presence was more than when Roman was there with him, right? As compared to where he wasn't. So it's just, to me, they let two great opportunities go by, you know, and all because they wanted to continue this. So I don't know. Maybe they're looking to the future. Maybe they know that they're set now. They don't have to worry about it, and they want this whole Roman Reigns thing to be looked on in the future as something magical and mythical and all that stuff. But there again, they don't respect their audience. Then they're more concerned about how they look. You know.
All right, I want to pivot before we get out of here because I don't want to keep you here too long. Though I am very much enjoying this, and hopefully we can do this again. You, as someone who has studied the history of wrestling, where do you stand with AEW as it pertains to your enjoyment, your sort of instincts about pro wrestling, and also, do we underrate AEW's last 4 years a little bit because WWE is such a giant company? Like, I get people who don't like AEW, and I think some of the criticisms are valid, but to undercut these guys for what they've been able to do in such a short time, I think is probably a little dishonest.
It is, and again, it's not emotion, it's not opinion, it's not biased opinion. It's facts, right? The facts are there. The numbers tell you that Tony Khan has done something right. Now he did hit a wall, at around September-ish or so with the whole CM Punk thing, and again, I think to this day he hasn't really dealt with it how he should, and I think that's going to come back to bite him in the ass later. But to your point, I think that AEW should be looked upon as a huge success because they did overcome a lot of odds, and you could say money mark all you want, but we've had money marks before. That doesn't correlate to success, you know? And I think there's a lot of changes that happened because of AEW, coming into the picture. I think, talking as a fan, I mean, we have an embarrassment of riches, man, when it comes to all these great matches, all these great shows. How do you go from having MJF and Bryan Danielson have a classic, a classic, and then you have WrestleMania a couple weeks later? Like, this is a great time we're living in, right? And to me, the narrative that I was trying to tell people on my show was, let's enjoy this because this
Yeah.
is not permanent. This is not permanent. This is just another era in wrestling that one day we're going to be nostalgic about. And to see all this divide and all this hate one way or the other, it just makes me sad because, again, that's all ego driven, and it's all very emotion based, right? Just if you were to just sit back and just say, I'm going to watch these companies for what they are, just stop comparing them, you're going to have a great time as a wrestling fan because you're getting too much for the era that we live in. So I think Tony Khan has been a positive for sure. You can't deny that in the entire business. And I'm a little sad for him and his company because now with this merger, he's going to be a very distant number two now. You have the number one company has so much resources now.
Yeah.
And what concerns me is that they're going to be in control of the marketplace when it comes to contract times, because who's to say that WWE just doesn't overpay someone just to get them off the table, you know? So I'm a little bit sad for AEW because they, with this all these news that came out, they do become even the little brother, even younger little brother of
Mhm.
WWE, and it's gonna be hard because being number two in this country is always hard. So Tony Khan's gonna have to work a little harder, and I also feel that it's also because of how big WWE has become or will become. It's also going to make AEW's big show seem a lot less extravagant and important because of it, So
Okay.
again, I think, go ahead.
Speaking of the big show, they are, they're taking a big risk in doing this London show at Wembley Stadium. Historically, the Brett and Davey Boy match, though I think it's I think they reconstructed the stadium since then, but like 80,000 to go from, I don't know what their biggest house was, maybe 17,000 fans
Hmm.
or whatever,
I
to
think
80,
Chicago,
probably
the
to
Punk debut.
yeah, the United Center, to this giant stadium. That is a risk,
It's a
but
huge risk.
I also, I think a couple things. One, Tony must really believe that he has a couple things up his sleeve that are going to pay off and create interest. But two, I also feel like this dude is working his ass off to keep up, and he's putting resources into the product, and almost like if you goal set, you've set this goal of Wembley Stadium, and you're like, now I'm so focused and determined to make this a great show. So I'm excited to see what he does, but at the same time, he put it out there, man. That is a tough place to sell, and no matter how many tickets he sells, there's going to be a portion of the wrestling audience who's going to say, "Oh, this is a failure," and it's more than likely not going to be a failure. It may not be a giant success, but what do you think about this risk that he's taken here?
I think it's a big risk, but I think the profit margin is doable. I think first time in the market, I think the Euros are craving for an authentic AEW show in that part of the world. And I think I'll tell you right now. I mean, I'll go out on a limb. I think he'll get 50 in easy. I think 50 is set. And
Okay,
I
I
think if
set
they
the I set the over under with Big Dave M at 55.
Okay, I'm going with 50. Okay, yeah, I'll go one up on you. I'll play the prices right with you, and I'll go 56, just in
Okay, there
case
you go.
I'll win. If you know, so I think they'll get 56 easy.
Wow.
Curiosity, first time in the market. The Euros, longtime wrestling fans, right? Very very passionate, very rowdy. Um, but you're right. I think it's very unfair how we treat both companies, because when we had that show that was headlined by Drew McIntyre and Roman, for all intents and purposes, it was a little bit of a flop. They I think they got like 55 in there. They were expecting around 60, 70. They had those inflated prices that they ended up lowering later on. But everybody saw it as a success because it's WWE and the way they promote. Whereas with AEW, it's always, you know, how are you gonna fail? That's always the question with it. That's the premise with AEW. How are
Yeah.
you gonna fail? And so getting 55 in there, 56 in there, because it's not 90, when nobody's saying they're gonna get 90 in there, that would be seen as a failure. And that's very unfair because again, it's too different. The way they treat both companies is completely different. But I think you'll get 56 in there for sure. I just don't know who would be the local star in there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could bring in a Will Osprey for a show like that. There's a Zack Saber Jr. out there who, I don't know who the homegrown star is, but UK talent. You
Hmm.
have access to those guys. Uh, but like you said, first time in the market, it's everybody's sort of like, the big local star because they just haven't had that product, and it will obviously be much harder to go back a second time, but let's wait for the first show before we even
Oh,
think about that.
of course, yeah.
All right, I want to.
I'm considering going. By the way,
No
um,
way,
uh,
that would be awesome.
yeah, because I want an excuse to go to the UK, and what better excuse
Hell
is there
yeah.
than going to an AEW show? And honestly, I mean, I don't think the tickets are going to be in that high of demand to
No,
where I
I don't
can't
think
get in.
so
So,
either.
so
Well,
I'll
WWE
probably.
is going to be in the O2 for Money in the Bank, I think,
But those
as
those
well.
tickets flew. They flew.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
all
I looked
okay.
into that, and they're gone. That's an arena, so it's
Yeah,
different. You
smaller.
know.
All right, I
Yeah.
want to end with this. As someone who, I would say you have pretty smart critiques on things that are going on. I'm just kind of interested in who you think is doing really good in their role. Who's possible sort of future star kind of thing. Like, who are you watching? Who are you paying attention to in the wrestling scene right now? Who are your favorites?
Well, I think Gunter is someone that we should all keep an eye out for. I think it's interesting that they took a risk. They're promoting him a lot lately, and I think they, you could tell that they see big things for him, just the way they're setting him up. He had that little stare down with Brock at the Royal Rumble. He had a great showing at WrestleMania. He's another one of those guys that they keep on saying, oh, this legacy champion with the Intercontinental title. Actually, they tend to be doing that with other titles, which is good. We want that because
Yeah.
you want to keep this lineage with prestige. All
Yeah,
the
you
titles.
want him to be important.
Right. So I that he's one of the guys that I'm looking at right now. But other than that, I just think the main event angles have been hitting on all cylinders when it comes to WWE. I mean, SmackDown has all been pretty much bloodline, and
Yeah.
so I think Sammy and Kevin Owens, they had a career year. More so Sammy than pretty much anyone else, on Raw. I'll tell you who's interesting is LA Knight, who's an older guy, but he seems to be catching on as his like cult favorite, right? Which we've seen. I mean, one of the things about these guys, and we've seen them for years, they got to make all their money now because
Yeah.
this is very short. It's very limited. That window of being over is very limited, and we've seen it through with different guys. But I'm very, he's a guy that I've been a fan of since he was in TNA.
Yeah.
Always had the great promo. He's a very confident guy. So it's interesting for me to see him get over at a WWE level to the point where people are starting to back him up. And I wonder if Vince was in charge, if he would give him that shot, because this guy's in his 40s, from what I understand, or close to 40. So I don't know. I think this is one of those guys that has to count his blessings, that Paul took over for that time that he did, because that was his little window back in, and sure enough, it's working. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. I
What
do
about
hope that. Go ahead.
what about on the AEW side? Anybody catching your eye?
Well, MJF, of course. I think it's hard with AEW because they have so many people with potential.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the criticisms that I have for Tony Khan is that he doesn't it seems like he really focuses a lot at the top of the card, and he kind of lets the middle and the bottom part just kind of book itself in a lot of ways. I know that's not what happens, but that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know how to promote guys like Jungle Boy, or even like a Sammy Guevara, all these guys that are going to headline the next show. One of the things that WWE has always been able to do is they allow these guys to become larger than life, you know. And it's something as simple as give us some video packages on these guys, make me start believing in them. Tell me why I should care about Jungle Boy Jack Perry. Why? He's just a guy with long curly hair, good promo, but that's it. So I think from a production standpoint, there's a lot of things that AEW could be doing better to get over the stars of the future, and they don't. Even that match with Hijo del Vikingo and Kenny Omega. Had that been on Raw or SmackDown, we would have been seeing video packages of that match for a month.
Yep.
We haven't seen anything in AEW.
No.
It's so frustrating, you know. But there again, I do love. Now, I don't particularly have my eye on any future superstar because again, they don't promote them well. But I do love the storylines. I do love that we're building towards this elite. They're feuding with who are they feuding with again?
Blackpool Combat Club.
Yeah, Blackpool Combat Club. Yeah. So I love that dynamic, right? And I love how it's not being spoon fed to us. Every week we're getting another layer of that story. So I like that stuff for sure.
All right, man. No, this was tremendous. The reason why I was so excited to talk to you, and I'll give folks a little bit of the insight here. The way that we used to communicate was through Facebook. And I lost my Facebook account because stupid people suspended it for no reason. I still haven't gotten it back. So that was my vehicle to communicate with you. And we would communicate, if not every day, like every other day, just shooting the stuff about something wrestling related. Yeah. And so I haven't had the opportunity to do that with you since what has it been, January or something since I haven't had my account. So this was fantastic. It's like we just were able to catch up for 3 months just doing this. So I 100% appreciate it. And, you've been on the old school Fight Game podcast.
Also hard. One of my favorites.
You've been with me for a while now. So I wanted to reach back out because I always have a blast talking to you. You're not, it doesn't seem like you're in the podcast game anymore. Is anything to plug at all?
I mean, people could follow me. Nowadays, I hang around on Instagram most of the time. Dead Boy Lost in LA. If people want to go there and talk some wrestling with me, little by little, I'm dipping my toes back into the internet wrestling community, because I don't feel like the cynicism is as bad as it was even like 4 months ago.
Hmm.
I think that's died down a little bit. I think both companies presenting the best possible product they can has kind of elevated and kind of taken that hate out. So
Yeah, actually, this is might be what happened. CPR said that Facebook saw that I won the G Spot Climax, and it decided it was time to
two
suspend my
nights in a
account.
row, but I mean 2 years in a row. You did it. 2 years in a row. That's amazing. You know how amazing that is now that you think about it, like, because you were spot on. Like, there was no rigging of none of this. You were able to foresee a lot of that. Um, and I think the only year you didn't win is because you weren't in it.
Well,
Or no, I
there
no,
was
I think
one where I actually had Jade Cargill in one just because I was like, no one's gonna pick her, but like if I saw her in public, like I would probably just stare at her for like 30 seconds and not be able to take my eye off her. But like yeah, like there you can only pick Trish Stratus and all these people so many times. But all right, so check them out on Instagram if you need to get some wrestling chat going, and I would love to have you on again at some point and just check in again because
Yeah,
you
just
have
let me know, man. I mean, even after a lot of these pay-per-views, there's a lot to talk about. I would love to come on here and just shoot the shit on that, and see what happens. But thank you for having me again. It's almost like, riding a bicycle. You just never forget. I
yeah
was a
no
little nervous, but once I caught my wheels, I was okay.
I know you love doing this, and
Hmm.
we've done a few of these with Big D as well. So we've done a few of these shows, and it looks like the people who were checking in live, a decent amount of people, and they enjoyed it. So I definitely want to bring you back, and we'll shoot this stuff again. But we'll end it here. And for Draven, I am Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.
Bye.